If you're mad at Blake Snell for leaving the Giants for the Dodgers, turns out you're mad at the wrong person.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, hosting this show since prior to the 2019 season, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already, and please just hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. And coming up on today's show, we're going to get into three topics, all of which are involving starting pitching. And the first topic involves Blake Snell, the Giants' I want to say ace last season, but certainly in the second half, not so much in the first half. But when it was all said and done, Blake Snell had an unbelievable season with the Giants, so much so that he turned it into a really big and nice contract with the Dodgers. 5-year, $182 million deal with Los Angeles. He is 32 years old, so hey, maybe things don't turn out so well towards the back end of that, but man, I mean, Blake Snell, he only pitched 104 innings, and even with the horrendous start to the season that he had, he ended up with a 3.12 ERA, 2.57 expected ERA, 2.43 fielding independent pitching. So he's just dominant when on the field, even if there's ups and downs. He doesn't pitch particularly deep into games, but nevertheless, it was a really good season despite not pitching so many innings. So, but the point is, this is coming from Susan Slusser of the San Francisco Chronicle, who wrote an article that came out on March 9th titled, Dodgers Blake Snell on Leaving SF. Quote, "The Giants didn't even talk to me." End quote. So, okay, like I said, if you're mad at Blake Snell for leaving the Giants, you're definitely mad at the wrong person, especially if you continue to read beyond just the headline here. So Slusser wrote on March 9th that this time last year, Snell was still 10 days away from signing with the Giants. Then he wound up pitching only 1 year for them, opting out of the $62 million deal as soon as he was able, November 1st. And then, ouch, before the month was out, he signed with San Francisco's arch rivals for 5 years, $182 million. Though he had hoped he would have at least some interest from San Francisco. Slusser continues, in the brief stretch he was a free agent, Snell said Sunday, so just a few days ago, quote, "The Giants didn't even talk to me. It was surprising. I thought they really liked me." End quote. And then Slusser continues, Snell is particularly tight with Giants manager Bob Melvin, who also was Snell's manager in San Diego, and he's good friends with team leaders Matt Chapman and Logan Webb. And then Snell said, quote, "I know Bob loves me, and I'm really close with Logan and Chappie, so I was shocked. I thought they'd come after me right away. I really liked it there. I was happy there, but they never even said anything to me." He continues, "I texted Bob Melvin, and he didn't reply. And Bob always replies to me, so I kind of had a feeling. But it was weird, especially with all the other teams that were interested in me." End quote. And so, my goodness, is this kind of hurtful? I don't know what the right word is. Like, shocking a little bit to hear Blake Snell say this. I knew all along, because there was this Instagram thing that Snell did that somebody on Instagram said that he chose money over winning, which made no sense at all because the Dodgers just won the World Series and consistently win more games than the Giants. And then Snell was like, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know anything about what goes on behind the scenes. And it didn't appear that the Giants made a super aggressive move to try to bring back Blake Snell. And also, when the whole Corbin Burnes situation happened, it was pretty obvious that on the starting pitching front that they weren't like, it seems that both Blake Snell and Corbin Burnes had a desire to pitch for the Giants, and the Giants just kind of twiddled their thumbs. They didn't even talk to Snell. And Corbin Burnes says that they hung around, but they just forget what the exact quote was, but it was just that they were not even remotely competitive with their offers. And all right, so what does that all mean? Let's just read all through this, and then I'll break it down in terms of what I think it all means. So Slusser clarifies that Snell and Melvin have talked since, Bob ignoring Snell's text messages, and their relationship is fine. Snell knows managers sometimes have to go radio silent during free agent season, and Snell is the one who opted out. After all, he could have returned to San Francisco if that was his top priority. So Slusser is correct. Of course, he didn't have to opt out, but it would have been the craziest decision we've seen in a long time if he decided not to opt out. It wouldn't have made any sense. As we can see, he ended up getting $182 million guaranteed rather than like 31. And so, of course, he was going to opt out. So it's not on Snell at all. So Snell said, there were a lot of teams after me. I just thought it was weird the Giants weren't one. And it is weird because he just pitched for them. I think there are some reasons that I'll get into in a minute, but he's just crystal clear here. So I like that players are kind of speaking out. Not that they're speaking out against the Giants. They're not saying, oh, I'm happy about that. I just like in general transparency. And when the teams aren't saying stuff like this, it's nice that the players are. And I'm glad Susan Slusser went out there and talked to Blake Snell, and she talked to Corbin Burnes. And so I appreciate this reporting, and it's good for the fans. And so, of course, I wanted to pass it along to you if you didn't see this. Anyway, Slusser says Snell likes the moves the Giants made, too, especially when they improved the defense by adding shortstop Willy Adames, a good friend of Snell's from their days in Tampa Bay. Snell said he's an outstanding human being, the best. And then Slusser writes, when the Dodgers came calling, Snell jumped. He wanted to be in California. So there you go. There's only a handful of teams that would have made sense. He wanted to be in California, and his wife, Haley, was all in favor of Los Angeles, which is closer to her family. Snell also knows Andrew Friedman, the Dodgers' top baseball executive from their time with the Rays. Haley likes Cali, period. And Andrew drafted me. That was really personal to me to get to play for him. And then regarding playing for the Dodgers, he said everybody just wants to win, and they're really good people who love baseball. I'm excited to come in here every day because I know Shohei Ohtani thinks the way I do. Mookie Betts thinks the way I do. Freddie Freeman, Max Muncy, everyone is on the same page. And then lastly, Snell says, I've always, in regards to his slow start last season and how, he got hurt twice with the same injury. He said, I've always needed a spring, and then not having it didn't go so well. There is something to coming in here earlier and getting locked in quicker. There are already things I'm working on doing next offseason to get better, and I'm excited for that to happen. And that's the end of that piece. And so there's a lot to break down there, and just the essence of it is that clearly, and again, hat tip to Susan Slusser for this and Corbin Burnes, that it wasn't that the players, I feel like we saw article headlines that were like, player X, Corbin Burnes, like spurns Giants. But like, no, they just weren't. Giants didn't talk to Blake. They didn't even contact him. Bob Melvin didn't even answer the text messages from somebody he's close to. So they just were not interested in bringing him back for whatever reason. So I want to give you what I think is the reason, and we'll also break down someone who is here for the long haul in Logan Webb, and then also the young pitchers on the Giants and a plan that Buster Posey has for them. And, the young pitchers, are worth talking about because they may be a big reason why the Giants never really were interested in Snell, apparently. So we'll get into all of that coming up in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site that is made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources on the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trademaster program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trademaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. All right, here we go. We're going to break down this Blake Snell report a little bit further and also get into Logan Webb. This is an article I've been wanting to touch upon for about a month, and we're finally getting to it today with the regular season just over 2 weeks away. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers tomorrow, the latest from spring training. I've also got just tons of articles and stuff that I've been compiling over the last month from spring training that if it's a quote unquote slow news day, there's tons of old news that is relevant, as we'll discuss with this article about Logan Webb coming up in just a minute. But I want to just wrap up my thoughts on Blake Snell. So is it a money issue, or is it a pitcher issue, or is it they think they're deep at starting pitching issue? So those are kind of the questions. And Snell signed quickly. Like Susan Slusser said, I don't recall, and it's not written here exactly when he signed his deal with the Dodgers. I want to say deal with the devil. It was pretty fast. It looks like late November, he already had a deal with LA. And so that was before the Willy Adames signing. And so you could definitely make an argument that the Giants were basically going to not hand out two major contracts and that they were prioritizing Adames. It is interesting that they didn't talk to him at all. And so they did talk to Corbin Burnes. So it could just be that Buster Posey decided, if we're going to go after a pitcher, we prefer Corbin Burnes because of durability, pitching deeper into games. Because for Snell, he just doesn't have a history of doing that. And last year he made 20 starts and pitched 104 innings. And so that's about 5 innings a start. And I think that, as we're going to see, the last thing we're going to discuss today is that they want their minor league pitchers going deeper into games. We're talking into the 7th and 8th innings. And so for Snell, when he pitched in the 9th, when he threw his no-hitter, that was the only time in his career he's ever pitched in the 9th. And it may have been the only time he's ever pitched into the 8th. I don't want to say that definitively because I'm actually not remembering, but it could just be that they didn't value his inability to be efficient and throw strikes consistently. And I don't know, but the fact, LA is obviously a good team at evaluating talent, and their contracts tend to work out. And so if the Dodgers valued him this highly and you didn't, maybe you have some reflecting to do on your priorities. So anyway, just saying, it's easy to want to be mad at Blake Snell, but you just really can't be in this situation. And also, you could be mad at ownership if it's about money. And both Snell and Corbin Burnes, like, you could have probably got one of those guys to sign here if you just made a competitive offer. And you could have brought in Adames probably with the same offer you already made. And I mean, obviously, because he signed for it. So there's definitely a, nit to pick with them. But also, we'll see how these contracts work out. Maybe they just are still uncomfortable. Maybe it's an ownership level thing where they're uncomfortable with long-term deals for pitchers after seeing like the way Johnny Cueto worked out, Jeff Samardzija worked out, etc. Especially long-term deals for pitchers who are already in their 30s. Like Snell is 32, as I said. Anyway, speaking of pitchers, Logan Webb on this team, no question about it. Thankfully, that was one of the good things that Farhan Zaidi did when he was here, was he got an extension done with Webb. Otherwise, I'd have to look a little more closely, but this may have been the last season that he would have been under contract, so thankfully it's not. But on February 15th, Shayna Rubin of the Chronicle wrote why Giants ace Logan Webb wants to change things up to regain his elite changeup. So Logan Webb, let's switch our attention to a pitcher who actually is here, and 28 years old, and signed through 2028. So we've got 2025, 6, 7, and 8. So that's 4 more years that Webb is under contract. And I can't recall. So he would have been a free agent at the end of this season. So thank goodness they got that extension done when they did. Anyway, in this article, Shayna Rubin says Logan Webb has every reason to be pleased with his results in 2024. The Giants ace cemented himself further as one of baseball's few true workhorses. He led MLB in starts with 33 and his 204 and 2/3 innings pitched led the National League. He was just 4 short of leading baseball in consecutive seasons. He placed 6th in National League Cy Young Award voting after recording a 3.47 ERA. But Webb, ever hard on himself, isn't satisfied. And then Webb said, in the last 4 seasons, it's weird. I thought last year was my worst year, and I finished 6th in Cy Young, but I really didn't enjoy it. Okay. I don't know if he means he didn't enjoy the season or his own performance, but Shayna Rubin says what ticked Webb off the most was the waning efficacy of his bread and butter pitch, the changeup. During spring and through the first weeks of the season, his changeup wasn't moving the way it typically did. Then, once he got the pitch soaring into the zone with a familiar trajectory again, he found opponents were prepared to attack it. Webb's changeup went from one of baseball's best pitches in 2023 to a concern in 2024. StatCast determined his changeup 2 years ago was only hit for a 236 expected batting average and 322 expected slugging by opposing hitters. Last year, the pitch was hit for a 308 expected average and 502 expected slugging. Rubin continues and says when the season ended, Webb sat down with Giants coaches to diagnose the issue. While he was happy with the shape of the pitch's path to the plate, it was clear that his usage of it had become predictable in certain counts. His slider, on the other hand, looked, quote, best it's been, end quote, on film, but he was throwing it just 21% of the time. Still seems like a pretty high usage to me, but still. Shayna Rubin continues. To keep hitters off his changeup, Webb is working this spring training to incorporate his cutter more prominently into his pitch mix against left-handed hitters. Bob Melvin said, just using both sides of the plate for him is an important thing. It'll make his changeup better. His breaking ball got better last year. Good pitchers look for ways to improve every year and are driven. He's really driven. He knows he got predictable at times, and lefties could stay out there with him a little bit, kind of stay out there and wait for the changeup and be comfortable. Nothing hard in is coming, I guess, is what that means. So Shayna Rubin says, Webb wove the pitch in and out of his mix throughout the summer until he went full throttle with it in his final 2 starts. He threw it 20 times in a win against the Orioles in September and went cutter heavy again in his last start against the D-backs. The cutter isn't Webb's best pitch metric-wise, but to keep hitters guessing, he said he's hoping to use it and the four-seam fastball, which is also not a good pitch metrics-wise. And Webb likes to joke about this. This is me talking, not quoting Shayna Rubin. But he likes to joke about how poor of a pitch his four-seam fastball is, but yet he uses it to like keep hitters off of the other pitches that are really good. And so he says he's hoping to use it and the four-seam fastball a combined 10% of the time, and throwing his changeup, sinker, and slider each 30% of the time. And then Webb said, the biggest thing is getting the changeup back to where it was 2 years ago. Adding a pitch that can keep guys off it a little bit. Looking back, it wasn't necessarily the movement, but the more and more you pitch in the league, the more guys see you. And so there you have it. I mean, so he didn't even qualify as to having a cutter according to the StatCast data last season. So he did. He threw it 2.6% of the time, and threw his four-seamer 5.3% of the time. So that does come close to 10%. It's 7.9%. So he just wants to up it a little bit. And the sinker was 40%, slider was 21%, and changeup was 30%. So decrease the sinker usage, I suppose, and even that's what he wants to do. He wants to mix it up and ever tinkering, ever hard on himself. He did. It wasn't his best season. He had a 3.47 ERA. The expected ERA was a little bit alarming at 4.31, which is much higher than it's been in any of the previous 3 years. So I get where he's coming from, but I have a lot of belief and confidence in his ability to improve, because he is driven. He's about as driven of a pitcher as there is, and he wants to be the best, and that's all you can ask for. And I hope that it works out, because as it's written, those pitches are not necessarily the best of quality, but if it keeps them off of his sinker, slider, changeup, more specifically changeup, sinker, slider, because, yeah, I mean, Logan Webb is just a really good pitcher. The changeup and the sinker are very, very good. The slider grades as a little bit below average. The league average slider has a stuff plus rating of 109, and Webb's was just 97. And so, but the league average changeup has a stuff plus rating of 94, and Webb's was at 109, and his sinker league average for sinkers is 98, and Webb's was 105. So this is a new school kind of thing, stuff plus. Overall stuff plus average is 100, and Webb's stuff plus average was 104, and location plus 106. So overall above average stuff, above average location makes him just one of the better pitchers around, but definitely I can see the desire to improve. The last thing I'll do is look at these last 2 starts where we're hearing he incorporated the cutter a lot more. I'm not going to check exactly on that, but yeah, I mean, he had 2 really good starts to finish out the year. 5 innings, 3 runs against Baltimore on the road with 8 strikeouts in 5 innings, and then 6 shutout innings against the Diamondbacks at home in his last start. So a combined 2.45 ERA in those 2 starts, 198 fielding independent pitching. Strikeout rate was good. Ground ball rate was good. Things looked good in those last 2 starts. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. And this spring, not that I would read too much into spring training stats, but he does have a 2.79 ERA. Strikeout rate is 26%. Walk rate just 2.6%. Ground ball rate 56%. So he's allowed some homers, but it's Scottsdale Stadium and the small ballparks and warmer air and all that. So wouldn't worry too much about that. So anyway, coming up in just a minute, we're going to get into this trend that Buster Posey apparently wants these young pitchers that they've got coming in the minor leagues to pitch deeper into games. So we'll tie that in also with how they intentionally, it seems, didn't go after pitchers who wanted to play here. Just like Kevin Gausman wanted to play here. Snell seemingly wanted to play here. Corbin Burnes as well. They like the young pitchers they have, and we're going to see a different style. We'll get into it in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. And so for this $200 bonus bet offer to new customers, if your first $5 bet wins, just be looking for the most lopsided scenario you can find. Place that $5 bet, and if it comes through as the odds may be in your favor there, then you're going to get $200 in bonus bets. So again, just visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, here we go. We're going to get into this topic that Buster Posey wants the Giants' younger pitchers and minor leaguers to pitch deeper into games. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers tomorrow, the latest from spring training. And also, I've got a ton of these stories that I'm sitting on. Thanks so much to our great beat writers who are down there, over there in Scottsdale, keeping tabs on the latest with the Giants as we get closer and closer to the season. So there's going to be more and more relevant, current events happening soon, as we're just over 2 weeks away from the opener. So very exciting. Anyway, Susan Slusser, back on February 16th, wrote a piece called Buster Posey's Pitching Revolution. Giants minor leaguers will get to pitch deeper in games. So this is a hot topic, an interesting topic, kind of a baseball topic, not just a Giants topic. And Slusser says, as baseball tries to curb skyrocketing pitcher injuries, many teams have experimented with scaling back innings for their top young starters, limiting pitch counts, or going with piggyback tandems, having two starters work in the same game. Old-timers scoff. Babying starters, the logic goes, means that prospects come up unable to get deep into games and have less of a clue how to approach hitters the third time through the lineup, or how to hold the same velocity in reserve for later in games. The fewer the reps, the more limited the experience. Stamina can suffer, and bullpens get overtaxed or overextended. So this is something you hear certain broadcasters, not necessarily ours, but if you're watching national games, you're going to hear this conversation happening all the time. It's a big baseball debate. But Slusser points out now the San Francisco Giants plan to reverse that trend. Unless there's a solid reason to restrict a young starter's innings, the team will give pitchers in the upper levels of the minor leagues a little more rein to pitch deeper into games. And Giants Director of Player Development, Kyle Haines, says, looking back, we erred on the side of maybe being more careful, and now we're going to be a little more aggressive and smart, where before it was conservative and smart, okay? We could always readjust 2 months from now. So they're going to try this out and see how it goes. And Slusser says, letting younger starters go deeper into games is one of those throwback philosophies that seems to fit with the Buster Posey front office vibe, slotting in right alongside allowing the manager to make his own decisions, which I take issue with that. There's no evidence at all that, Farhan Zaidi was out there making lineups or anything like that. And all the managers will say that. Bob Melvin will say that. Gabe Kapler will say that. Zaidi was intentionally not hands-on with those kinds of things. So that kind of irks me that is still a narrative. Anyway, continuing. Posey, San Francisco's top baseball executive, wants a team with more grit. Starters who get through 7 or 8 innings regularly are grinders, and giving farmhands the chance to do that at AAA, all the better. Mason Black, Giants minor leaguer / major leaguer, said, "This is the opportunity to learn how to go through the lineup that third, fourth time, how to set up hitters for the next at bat." Slusser points out he was up briefly last year and made it through the fifth inning just twice in 8 starts. That's actually not bad. And Black says, "I think it's more of an old school baseball approach, but I mean, I love it." Said Patrick Bailey, "It's hard to ask a young guy that hasn't gotten more than 5 innings in the minors to come up and do that in the big leagues. Typically, that doesn't work out well. And you shouldn't expect that out of them if they haven't been doing it." Said Kyle Harrison, "Some of us went from 2 or 3 innings to all of a sudden pitch counts in the 90s. Uncharted territory. That took some getting used to," end quote. And so I remember that with Harrison. He was very, very limited, and then they pretty quickly ramped him up later on. And we're going to hear more on why that was with Harrison in just a second. But Ryan Walker, Giants closer, said, Slusser says the drive to protect young pitchers has extended even to the bullpen. Closer Ryan Walker said that during his final year in the minors, when it became clear he was in the big league pipeline, he was suddenly held to 15 pitches per inning. Walker said, "I didn't know it at the time, and I was getting, paraphrasing, ticked off at my pitching coach because he wouldn't let me throw anymore. But I think it's good to have the starters throw more in the minors because when they get to the big leagues, we need them to be ready. If you want the pen to survive the whole year and be in top shape every time we go out there, having efficient starters helps." And then Slusser circles back on Harrison, says that Harrison was restricted in the first half of 2023 while at AAA, specifically because the front office wanted him to be available to pitch more innings for the big league club in the second half of the season. A hamstring injury mid-season further complicated Harrison's ramp-up process. So I do recall that being the case. Harrison said it wasn't ideal. By the way, Harrison hadn't made it past the 4th inning in 18 of his 21 appearances that season before he was called up. And then he says, "But I was walking a decent amount of guys too, and that's on me. I learned if I want to go longer, I have to be efficient, and that was part of the learning curve. It definitely helped me in certain weird ways." So anyway, Hayden Birdsong chimed in on this, said, "Most of us can get through more innings. It's just being ready 5, 6, 7 times and getting used to that and getting used to pitching every 5 days. It's the routine. You have to be smart about it." So Birdsong is commenting that it's not about stamina. It's more about the up downs is what they call them. Like you pitch and then you go in the dugout and you sit down and you wait while the hitters hit and then you go back out there. So you were up and then you were down and then you're back up. And so it's about the number of times doing that that's more difficult than just the stamina itself. Kyle Haines said, "Pitcher injuries are up year over year, and the entire industry is at a loss when it comes to figuring it out. There are a lot of variables, and we try to go on an individual basis, but for every story of ours where someone's workload was reduced in the minors and their pitch counts weren't extended, there are tons of pitchers who threw too much in the minor leagues and we never saw them in the major leagues. The question we're trying to answer is how do we get young pitchers the experience they need as safely as possible and not come up short on either end of this spectrum of injury or lack of development. We've got to make sure we take care of people. We're trying to find that sweet spot." So yeah, that is a tough assignment, but an important one. And anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast with hosts Dominic Martino and Matthew Anne. MLB draft season is here. Be the most informed fan and set yourself up for a league win. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a ton, so thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. Today, you are now Locked On Giants.